Hello, greetings to people as you're logging on to the meeting and coming to the annual meeting for the Historical Society. We'll just give it a couple minutes before we get started as people log in. All right. We'll still have some people joining us, but I want to get started and make sure that we can respect everyone's time. And thank you for being here. If we haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Rainey Bench, and I am the Executive Director for the Mount Desert Island Historical Society. And I wanted to welcome you to our 91st annual meeting, which is really excited as we sort of head into the end of our first century as an organization. We have a lot of great things that we've been able to accomplish, and it's always a little bit weird in August to look back at the previous year, but it's also a nice opportunity to take some time to reflect on the successes, especially in a really challenging and odd year like last year was, and close it out as we continue to move forward with our work. So tonight, our order of events, we have a really exciting keynote speaker with Catherine Schmitt, who will be talking about the process of annotating the Champlain Society logbooks for her edition of Chabacco, for the special edition of Chabacco in 2021. We also have a business portion of the meeting. I know that's always not the most exciting part, but if you wouldn't mind hanging around, we have some officers that we want to elect for the board and some incoming board members that we want to elect. We also have the Ann Benson Award for Extraordinary Volunteer Service. So there'll be a short program for the business meeting at the end of Catherine's presentation. So for now, it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, Catherine Schmitt, who's the editor of the 2021 edition of Chabacco. And I just wanted to mention, it may not be really obvious when you see Chabacco how much work goes into this publication, but it takes about 18 months from start to finish for one edition of Chabacco to be published. We start with a theme that we think about, that we think would be compelling and that we could find interesting things to talk about. We put out a call to authors to see if we can get enough interest in volunteer authors to contribute articles. They have time to do their research and writing. We go through a really long editing process, work with a designer before finally it goes to publication and then is put in the mail for you. So normally that's the process. In 2021, we had a really special edition of Chabacco. And instead of having a variety of authors talk about different topics and contribute different types of articles, we have the annotation of the Champlain Society logbooks from 1880 to 1882. And so for that reason, it's special, but it's also special because this was many, many more years in the making than just 18 months. Catherine Schmitt, I'm really excited to hear a little bit more about her passion for the logbooks and for this project. She was fascinated with both the science that's captured in the logbooks and the historic landscape of the island as seen through the members of the Champlain Society, who were students from Harvard here between 1880 and 1890. And so I think what I found really fascinating is in historic records, it's really rare to find examples of humor or people's individual personalities coming out. And hopefully if you've had a chance to read the Chabacco for this year, you can see, especially in 1881, there's so much playfulness between the various authors. And so Catherine's ability to dig in and learn about the people, the places, and the science that were recorded in this logbooks is really, I think, a fascinating way to make them relevant and to understand their lingering importance in the overall history of the island. So I'm really excited to introduce Catherine and to welcome you to our annual meeting.
Everyone, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to be here and hear a little bit more about the Champlain Society logbooks. So let's start with the logbooks themselves. It's 24 notebooks in total, 19 of which are held by the Mount Desert Island Historical Society, and the rest are at Harvard. In total, it's 1,500 pages. It includes photos. Their records also include specimens that are scattered at various archival collections around the Northeast, and they span a time frame from 1880 to 1893. So a lot of them have marbled covers, as you can see here. Some of them have lined pages. So these materials were organized and kept in the library of Charles Eliot and later kept by members of the Eliot family. And they were given by Ted Eliot to Nan Lincoln in the 1990s. And then Nan gave them to the Historical Society in 2007. So in order to research the Champlain Society and these members, and to research these logbooks, we have to convert 1,500 pages of 19th century handwriting to text that can be read and analyzed. So the first step in this project takes us back almost a decade to 2012, when we began the process of digitizing and transcribing the logbooks. And this was a project supported by the Maine Humanities Council with the Maine Historical Society. And so we transcribed them according to Maine Historical Society and Maine Memory Network guidelines. And so this was a lot of hours by myself and by volunteer Maureen Fournier to transcribe page by page what was in the logbooks. And this is what the final product looks like. So they're PDF documents with the scan of the page and then the accurate transcription. So this means that the line breaks, the punctuation, it's going to be an exact copy of what's in the script. And that's what the transcriptions look like. And Maureen also did the majority of the scanning of the logbook pages. And so this was many hours over a couple of winters of learning everyone's handwriting. And sometimes we would scrutinize and sort of contact each other and struggle with certain words. But this was sort of a big push for this part of the project. And we ended up with full transcriptions of all of the Historical Society held notebooks on Maine Memory Network. We also have all of the photos are in there as objects. But what we found was that just putting the logbooks online wasn't enough. So they are isolated PDFs, and we needed to help to tell the story about what these artifacts were. And so that included an introductory article. So this was the first summary article since Nan Lincoln wrote a story for, I think it was the Bar Harbor Times in the 1990s about the logbooks. There wasn't a lot of information out there until this, as part of the Mount Desert Island Shaped by Nature online exhibit that was led by the Historical Society. We also had a couple of articles in earlier volumes of Chabacco. So Visionary Science of the Harvard Barbarians was in 2014. And in this article, it summarizes who the Champlain Society were, and it kind of looks at 3 aspects that made them unique. So there was a lot of research into the Champlain Society for these articles, including sort of how they experienced the island. So camping is something that made them unique, and a little bit about what camping was like in the 19th century and what other college students were doing, because the fact that they did science as part of their summer vacation also made them unique. And they sort of did it as an extracurricular activity and not as part of any coursework. And their age was also made them different. And then Caitlin McDonough McKenzie also explored the botanical department led by Edward Rand in her article in 2015. A few more articles came out in Maine Boats, Homes and Harbors, Island Journal, Friends of Acadia Journal in 2014 and 2015. And I just want to acknowledge that a lot of this work and this research was supported by the University of Maine and a 6-month sabbatical that I was able to take from work, and that allowed me to complete a lot of this research and writing. The Champlain Society also found their way into my book, Historic Acadia National Park, in 2016. They have a whole chapter, and I just want to point out that this book was part of a series, and so there's a few other books for those of you who are fans of these other national parks. I also have done a lot of presentations and shared the story of the Champlain Society with all of these groups who are listed here, totaling probably thousands of people over the last 10 years. In 2016, the Historical Society had the Champlain Society the focus of their sort of centennial exhibit for the Park Service. And so here are just some images from that exhibit. So again, there was a lot of research that went into producing this exhibit, including the map that you see, which shows the locations of all of the hikes that they took and all of the sails that they went. So this is based on a master spreadsheet of their comings and goings around the island in the first few years. We took a cruise around Frenchman Bay and we visited some of the places that they like to go to, including Calf Island and High Head and other areas. It was a foggy day, so we couldn't see much, but we did share the story and we had a good time. And this was in August 2016, so 5 years ago. So even with all of that, we still weren't finished. What we found about the Maine Memory Network publication is that the notebooks were isolated and they didn't have a lot of context or orientation for people. And so it was really Tim Garrity's credit. So he was the one who led the charge to produce sort of a more synthetic publication, which we originally were calling an anthology of the logbooks. We didn't quite know the final form that it would take, just that we wanted to publish them in an edited and annotated volume and make it include the photos and have it be something that was very accessible and enjoyable to read. And so that sort of launched the current project. And this is just all of the steps that went into producing this volume of tobacco. And I'm only gonna talk about a few of them today. And the first was to form the advisory committee. So I just want to acknowledge again, all the help that I had producing this volume. And the advisory committee, we met a couple times a year, shared drafts, looked at covers, got input about the kinds of things that needed to be annotated, the kind of visuals that we wanted. And so that was really helpful and kept us going throughout the couple years. Another really helpful thing, again, because of Tim's leadership, he sort of knew about this Institute for Documentary Editing that ran a sort of what we called Camp Edit, a program, and I was awarded a scholarship to attend the Institute for Documentary Editing. And these were a couple of the textbooks that the students received. And this was everything from how to do transcriptions, how to put transcriptions online using a lot of HTML coding, to how to put together a publication, to promotion. And that was really helpful. And I had fellow students at the Institute from the John Smith papers, Martin Luther King Jr. papers, Thomas Jefferson papers. And so that was really interesting to be around people who were really working with some very interesting primary source documents. So some of the challenges that I had at this time in thinking about all of the research and the logbooks themselves was, what do we include? What don't we include? At this time, we're still thinking of all of the 19 notebooks. the yacht logs, the camp logs, the meetings, how to handle overlaps, you know, and then also what to do about publishing and how to publish it. We were considering going to academic and trade publishers with the publication itself. And this, so funding for this publication, even before we decided on doing it as Chabaco, a lot of the research was into the members themselves. So this was something that hadn't yet been done that we decided really needed to be done. And so there were 3 trips. I made 3 trips to Harvard to research the Champlain Society members in May 2017, September 2017, and October 2018. And so here's just a picture of me in the Harvard archive. So the information was spread over probably 5 or 6 different libraries and museums at Harvard University. Some of the sources in the Harvard archives would be, so there's class secretary reports, and some of these you can find online, but as you can see on the wall here, they have the secretary of every class, you know, reports every couple of years on what the members are doing. And so you can read up on their career and their life. There's also class albums. So there's photo albums, and then there's like a senior class book where they do like a write-up of their life story. They get like a huge lined page. And then there's things called biographical files. So every student at Harvard has a folder with their name on it, which has their academic records in it. There's like a little biographical card. It might have newspaper clippings about their life. It might have information, things like obituaries might be in there as well. So those are very helpful. Also use those visits to just learn more and research the Harvard environment. So this is a photo of Gray's Hall, which was where they met and where the Champlain Society had a lot of their meetings, including the very first meeting in March of 1880, where they fell. I don't know which room number, so they were in number 34 Gray's. So I have yet to get inside and actually see the room, but I sort of photographed all sides of the building, looked at things like what trees might still have been there in the 1880s. And then also the individual collections. So some of the members who went on to have scientific careers or academic careers at Harvard have their papers in various libraries. So here's just 2 examples of Roland Baxter, who worked in the botany department, but was an entomologist with the Champlain Society. And so I looked through his lab notes. And then his specimens are also in the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard. And then William Morris Davis has his papers, including his sketchbook from the sails that he made with the Champlain Society around Mount Desert Island. So there's 1 page in Chabaco from this notebook, but here you can do a different page with his notes and sketches and the shoreline of where they went. Another individual collection was the bird specimens from Henry Spellman and Charles Townsend, and correspondence and other files that they had in the archives of the Museum of Comparative Zoology. So on the left is a photo of me holding one of Spellman's birds, and on the right is the library at the Museum of Comparative Zoology, which is just such a historic building. So to be able to go in there, not as a tourist, but to go in as a researcher was definitely a highlight of this project. And another thing, I think that these individual stories really, to me, are some of the most interesting stories that came out of this project. So this is only a handful of members that have had this level of research, but every single member of the Champlain Society is worthy of an article or a book themselves. They're just really interesting. And so here's the article that I wrote about Spellman and also Charles Townsend, and was able to dig into their life and career a little more, and their lifelong interest in birds, even though they both went on to professional careers. And these individual stories are really what reveal their collective impact. So certainly the same is true of Charles Eliot. And so these quotes and these images of his text are from his collection. So not from the Champlain Society logbook, but from his personal diaries. And so all these other papers and collections help to add the context to the Champlain Society notebooks. Here's just another quote and image of Charles Eliot's handwriting and his statements about the committee that met to discuss the need to preserve Mount Desert Island. And then also you come across some cool surprises. So here's a photo of the class album entry by Theodore Roosevelt. So this is one of those moments when you're doing archival research that you just sort of, you kind of stop in your tracks. And when I found this, I kind of looked up and like waved over the librarians from, you know, in Harvard archives, because I was like, you should come look at this. And they all sort of gathered around and we looked at it. And you know, at the very bottom, he talks about the trip that he made to the Maine woods to hunt caribou. Another thing that we did that the Historical Society supported and that Harvard was very cooperative is we had them digitize the botany reports. So Edward Rand kept the reports of the Botanical Department, and they're with his papers, which are very comprehensive, in the Gray or Barium archives at Harvard. And so we worked with them, and they were very agreeable and digitized all of the notebooks. So these are not transcribed yet, but the digital PDFs are available online. And then sort of came the work of editing and annotating. And we quickly realized that we had to make decisions about what to publish, because the full text, if we just look at just the summer camp logs, right? So the collection includes meeting records from throughout the year, secretary reports. But if we just think about the summer camp logs, that was 165 pages of just text. And so it was too long, and we had to make decisions of taking sort of this mountain of research and mountain of text and really convert it to the molehill that this still impressive volume of tobacco represents. And so, you know, we sort of took a cue from the studious Harvard boys and went through the logbooks and thought about, and Maureen again was a huge help here, what items would not be common knowledge? What are the things that needed additional orientation and context, or just definition and identification? The primary sources that we used, in addition to basic web searches, are listed in the back of the volume in the bibliography. But you know, we didn't really discover any new amazing sources on the history of Mount Desert Island that any of you would not already know about. I will say that maps were incredibly helpful. So there's a lot of place names that are different than names that we use today. And so both Rand's 1893 map, as well as earlier maps and atlases of the era, were very helpful for things like even figuring out their trail routes, as well as place names. And then just acknowledged a lot of people who helped us with information and interviews and correspondence, shared their personal knowledge of island history. And there was a lot of people who contributed, and a lot of institutions and organizations who provided funding to help support the 3 years of research and work that went into this volume. So just a couple sort of other things, I think, and I'm happy to take questions about researching specific things. I think a couple of the things that were really interesting to dig into a little bit was just the working history of Mount Desert Island and the region. So all the mentions about mining, learning more about mining and farming and fishing and logging, which the Champlain Society members described a lot, learning their trail routes and what it was like to walk across the island in the 1880s, learning how important things like the ferry schedule was. So much of their time was based on when the ferry was coming and going. A couple of outstanding things include, I was not able to figure out everybody's handwriting. So it could be done, but it just would take a level of work. I just could not quite get there in time. And then there's still a few people that we have questions about that we'd love to learn more about, including William Bryant, who was the cook for the Champlain Society. And we're not quite sure if we have figured out his correct identity or not. So knowing that this volume is published, which is only the first 3 summers. So anyone who's interested, you can go to those PDFs and read the rest of the story. But a couple things are coming up next. So I'm really excited about the Landscape of Change project, where we're finally going to look at the science of the Champlain Society and use it to contribute and work with scientists who are working today to understand how the island has changed in the last 140 years. We will continue to research the Champlain Society members and their associates. So the Charles Eliot collection, I've been in touch with the librarians at Harvard about helping them. That collection needs to be inventoried and organized a little better. There were a lot of women that they interacted with and that contributed to their scientific efforts that I think we need to do some more research and share their stories. I do think at some point transcribing the botany department reports would be helpful, certainly for science, and then sharing their story more with the broader land conservation community, especially given their position as students, as youth, and their contributions to land conservation. I don't think that full story has gotten out yet. Just a note about Landscape of Change for any of you who want to get out and do work like the Champlain Society did. We're encouraging everyone to go out and observe birds and butterflies and moths and bees and record your sightings using iNaturalist. I'm happy to talk about that more. And we actually have a BioBlitz if you want some help and want to learn how to do this. This Thursday coming up at Cerdamont, we'll have some technicians leading that BioBlitz, again, using iNaturalist, and I can put that link in the chat. So these are the things that's next, and I'd really like to thank Rainey and everybody at the Historical Society. I think, you know, none of this would not have happened if all of us were not interested and excited about this story. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Catherine. I'd be happy to take any questions if anybody has any questions for Catherine about the work she did, the research, or the process. Unfortunately, Maureen has been trying to get online and she could have answered some too, but her link we weren't able to get her on. But she's going to watch the recording, and so she could answer any questions as some of the transcriptions. But in the meantime, if anyone has questions for Catherine, you can put them in the chat section or raise your hand and we will be able to see you, and you can go ahead and ask a question about her work. Catherine shared the link to the BioBlitz that's going to be taking place this Thursday, as she mentioned. So feel free to check that out in the chat section. All right, so does it seem like there's any questions coming up? So I have a question just in terms of like getting to know and doing the biographical research on the Champlain Society members. Were there things in their biographies, like based on what you knew of their personalities in the logbooks, and then when you read about like where they went with their careers or their lives afterwards, that you found surprising or really like took a turn that you didn't expect?
Yeah, so some of them, it was interesting to see, like a lot of them ended up in business, like working at shoe factories or, you know, a lot of textile mills. A lot of them just went on to like be managers at big mills like Pepperell Mill in Southern Maine or mills in New Jersey. Some of them, a lot of them went to Chicago. You know, it was interesting to sort of see where they end up. And then some of them, like, so Frank Clark was a member in later years, and there was all these newspaper clippings about how he kind of had, I think he had mental health issues. And he went out west and invested in, I think, logging and lumbering and like sawmills, and like made a bunch of money so he could kind of retire early. And then he was like in San Francisco, and people think he just walked off the end of a pier and like disappeared and like drowned because they just saw like his hat floating on the water. But then his wife was like, no, he's in Southern California, like out of mental health. Anyway, so just like really sort of interesting things that raised more questions, I think than answers. I think, you know, it's interesting because I think if more of them, if there were more opportunities to pursue science as a career, I think more of them would have taken it, but they didn't have as many options back then.
I wondered about that too, about how few of them sort of stayed in the science field, but that's an interesting perspective, is that it wasn't necessarily a professional field, maybe other than in academics. It was more of a hobby.
Yeah, I mean, right? So like botany wasn't even a class that was taught to undergrads until the mid 1880s. And so so you had to kind of stay as a professor. There weren't like jobs as researchers. So it was only teaching jobs, and there's just only so many of those. And if you're not going to stay in academia, there just wasn't a lot available. And these weren't, they weren't super, a lot of them, they all did work for a living, right? So they weren't that wealthy where they didn't have to work. I think there's a
Tim Garrity wants to know which member of the Champlain Society would you most like to have a beer with?
Oh, Charles Eliot. That's an easy one.
Nice. Any other questions? I thought I heard somebody sort of speak up. I didn't want to interrupt someone.
Randy, Catherine, it's Rick Wheeler. There are a number of photographs of the Champlain Society members with ladies. And I wondered if you could speak to their social life and how did they meet people when they were here?
Yeah, sure. So they went to dances and hops at the castle in Southwest Harbor was one of their most popular places that they went. And I think, the ladies, they knew that there were boys camping in the field, in Smolledge's Field or at Astaku. In the very first summer, they talk about having visitors. So word got out that there was a group of young men there for the summer. And given their age, it's easy to imagine they'd want to socialize. And they talk a lot about ladies visiting. And then when it gets to like 1882, you start to see the social scene kind of taking over from the science. And then actually in the meeting record, so what's not in Chabaco, but you see them having, so this would be like late 1880s as they start to get married and have children, debates about whether or not to make wives honorary members of the Champlain Society. I think the most interesting thing is that Edward Rand met his wife on the island as part of the Champlain Society. So she was somebody that they would have, there's a mention of them meeting her at the castle in Southwest Harbor, and then they ended up getting married later on.
Thanks.
I would love to know more of their names. So we only, we don't know who they were. There's only a couple names that we know about because they had later relationships.
David
Little.
I just had one thing I was going to mention. When I was giving book talks on my book with Carl, Art of Acadia, I came across a reference to Henry Rand's photographs, which you might have seen. It's in a book that I found years ago in a bookstore called American Light, The Luminous Movement by Wilmerding. And it's on page 286. There's a long paragraph about Edward Rand on Mount Desert Island.
Yes, thank you. Henry Rand's, the Southwest Harbor Public Library has most of his photos are in Main Memory Network. And he actually went and took photos of the Champlain Society campsite sort of later on. And so we're hoping to maybe use those as part of Landscape of Change to look at things like sea level change.
What was interesting to me was the description of his work as being luminous. I'd never heard that before, and Wilmerding was, I think, the first person to put Rand within the luminous movement of photographers. So.
Thank you, David.
Sure.
Any other last questions or comments for Catherine before she has another presentation this evening? Well, this was wonderful. I'm really grateful. Thank you, Catherine, for your time and your expertise and for your work with the Historical Society to make these really accessible and meaningful to people. I think that that's just a remarkable contribution that we're able to make thanks to your efforts. So appreciate it. And we will, thank you. We'll carry on with the rest of our annual meeting. I again would just encourage people to stay because we do have the vote of the membership that we will take place at that just shortly at the end of the meeting. But I wanted to follow up with, let's see, some remarks on 2020. As I mentioned, this is our annual meeting from looking at 2020 as highlights and the things that have happened. I started at the Historical Society in January of 2020, and it was a very interesting time to start there with about 2 months in the office before we had to close everything down and go and work from home. But I'm really grateful because the team, which included Tim Garrity, who retired as executive director but stayed on as historian for the year, Leah Lucy, who is our director of operations, and Patrick Calloway, who is our collections technician. They were really phenomenal in terms of being able to transition everybody to working from home, to being able to share the office space on a rotating basis as we needed to. And then I really want to credit this team for thinking super creatively about how to stay engaged with our members and with our mission. And I think that we have some really great and strong programs that will continue as a result of the pandemic, including Chabacco Chats. So if you haven't had a chance to see any of the Chabacco Chat series, we launched it in 2020. We continued it through the spring. We're taking a summer break and then we'll start it back up in the fall. But this is a great opportunity to get to know some of our authors like Catherine Schmitt, Eric Schenkel, who's on this program or watching this meeting. He gave a Chabacco Chat with his son, which was really great. Lots of different authors have been able to come on and talk about their research and their work. And we've been able to expand that to people who are currently doing research using our collections. So maybe they haven't written an article about Chabacco, but they've been able to access their different research projects through the records of the Historical Society. And then we were able to do an interview with them, learning more. So those are all through our YouTube channel or our website that you can go back and look. They're about a half an hour each, so not a huge amount of time. Last year was the bicentennial of statehood for Maine. So if you remember, our Chabacco from last year focused on before 1820. And we also opened an exhibit that Tim Garrity curated at the Soamesville Museum, commemorating, or not commemorating, but exploring how we commemorate. So what is it that we remember? What do we bring forward about different events in the past? What do we celebrate? What do we sort of suppress? And how did the centennial of statehood look really different than the bicentennial of statehood? So that exhibit was able to be open to the public despite the pandemic, which was great. We had a lot of good success with that show. We published a great edition of Chabacco, as I said, with new scholarship about the path to statehood. We were able to host our annual baked bean supper last year, despite the fact that everything ended up getting shut down soon afterwards. We were able to be in person, and University of Maine professor Liam Reardon came in to talk about statehood to a packed house at the high school, which was great. We are members of a 13 member organization called the History Trust, which is committed to putting historic resources online through a digital archive that is shared with all of the members of the History Trust. So you have sort of one-stop shopping for historic research. And so we are part of that History Trust, but I'm also serving as secretary to the History Trust. And Pauline Angione, who's on our board, has been a really instrumental leader in the History Trust. I would encourage anyone who wants to learn more about island history to visit the historytrust.org website, where you'll see blogs about the different partner organizations and the work we do. And also, if you want to search for any historic records or documents, you'll be able to search across all the different organizations from one location. So that was able to move again to a digital platform last year. So the timing on that was really good, as we all became keenly aware of how important online resources are to our daily lives, and especially to our ability to continue with our passion for history. We've been able to continue digitizing historic records to make them available free. Thanks to Leah Lucy's leadership, we were able to receive 2 payroll protection loans, which both have been forgiven. So we've had seamless operations. And as you'll hear from our financial report momentarily, 2020 actually ended up being a sound and solid financial year for the Historical Society. We exceeded our income budget thanks to generous donors and members, which a lot of people stepped up and not only gave their normal contribution, but we had people giving above and beyond because they were concerned that the Historical Society might have a difficult time getting additional funding because of the pandemic. So we're so grateful for each of you for all of your contributions, because without you, we wouldn't be able to do any of this. We launched a new climate change initiative. As Catherine mentioned, Landscape of Change includes 5 regional partners in addition to the Historical Society, where we're using historic records to document the impacts of climate change on the island and to start planning for climate resilience practices, policies, and mitigation strategies. We've provided research support for countless citizen historians looking for information about their buildings they're in, businesses that they know about, grave sites, family histories, genealogy, photographs, you name it. We get several requests a week for additional information and support for individual historic research. And then we also launched a quarterly e-newsletter. So we wanted to make sure that everybody knew what we were doing and what we were up to. So that constant flow of communication was really important with our members and with our membership. And that's definitely been really well received. So all in all, I would say that despite the fact that 2020 offered a number of challenges for a new leader and for an organization undergoing its own transitions between a longtime beloved executive director and Tim Garrity and me coming on brand new, I couldn't have asked for a better year than 2020 was, with this incredible group of people and the most phenomenal board that you could ever ask for. So that's my quick executive director's report. We do have our financial report, which we are able to give, and we have our treasurer, Ham Clark, who is on the line, and also our director of operations, Leah Lucy. So between the two of them, they will be able to give a financial report to you and the membership.
Oh,
Ham, I
hi.
don't know if you want to start. Yeah, thanks, Ham.
Can people hear me?
Yes.
Good, good. I just wanted to make a comment regarding Catherine's discussion. She referred to a lot of research that she had done in Harvard's myriad of libraries, Pusey Library, the Widener Library, to get information on the students and what they did after they left Harvard. Well, I was a Harvard graduate 50 years ago, and I just received a month ago the 50th anniversary book, which is authored by many, many members of our class. And that document is 1,200 pages and weighs about 20 pounds. So you need a pillow to prop it up on before you can read it. So if she did all that research going into the tombs of the Harvard libraries, I know what it's about because we just contributed to our own volume. So listen, it's just very briefly, and I really want to thank Leah and Rainey for driving not only the operational success of the society last year, but also Leah to keep tabs on, on all the financial transactions during the course of the year, and oversaw a very accurate monthly reporting, not only P&L, but also of our balance sheet. So and just in summary, we generated a net profit last year of $58,000 with member contributions of $235,000, which was actually up 16.5% versus 2019. And it was driven by a lot of expense controls. We did receive funding via the payroll protection plan last year. But last year with COVID was no ordinary year for any organization, and we really weathered the storm well and came out of it very strong financially. And the balance sheet, which actually in the second quarter dropped 20% based on, if you remember, the stock markets took a real shellacking with the realization that COVID was going to disrupt our economy big time. It ended the year flat at 417,000, but in the subsequent 6 months, it's had a 15% increase. So it's 480,000 today. So those are just some highlights, but be happy to answer any questions. And also, Leah, if you want to add to that summary, please feel free. I can see some charts that you developed. Maybe you want to talk to those.
Sure. I just created an overview of revenue and expenses since 2017. And you can see the increase that we've had since 2019. And then I also created a chart just detailing membership contributions based on giving levels. And it shows how 67% of our membership contributions come from extraordinary donors, over $5,000 in gifts. So we're grateful for those large contributions. And then the rest is split between our Voyager members of over 1,000 and then our individual contributions that we receive. So grateful for those contributions from our members.
Any questions for either Leah or me?
Can either
If
speak
not,
up or
I'll
put them in the chat?
turn it back to Rainey.
So we have this year the Ann Benson Award for Volunteer Excellence. This is an award offered in honor of one of our longtime volunteers at the Society named Ann Benson. And we don't give this out every year. We give it out when we really feel like there's someone whose extraordinary service is what we want to recognize. And I wanted to call out this year Pauline Angione for her incredible leadership, not only with the History Trust, as I mentioned before, but also she serves on our board of the Historical Society. And she is always available and interested in filling in a gap when we need it to help with leadership, to help with planning and thinking through different processes. She's an expert in sort of process management and project management thinking. So within the History Trust, she has been such an incredible asset to the MDI Historical Society, helping us to learn the process for inputting our own digital records onto the digital archive, which we are just about to start doing. If you have any time on the History Trust, you'll notice Mount Desert Island Historical Society only has less than 400 records on there so far, because we have had a challenge converting our in-house records to the format in the digital archive. And so Pauline has helped spearhead an opportunity to bring on a graduate student to come and help us correct the records or fix the records so that they can communicate between our digital software and the digital archive. She made the contract and the job description and helped us to be able to train the person coming on. So within the next few weeks, we should start seeing more and more records transferring from the files of the MDI Historical Society and onto the digital archive. And so much of that is in huge thanks to Pauline for her efforts there. She's also really amazing at building relationships and communication. I speak a very strange museum language that's related to collections that a lot of people don't understand or speak. And I don't speak anything related to digital technology and IT and software programs. And Pauline has this incredibly unique ability to bridge those worlds, not just for me, but for the peers in the History Trust. And I'm so grateful for her ability to communicate and to translate for one another. She's done training and professional development sessions for our staff at the Historical Society, in addition to huge numbers of hours for all of the History Trust partners, including taking all of the paper records from the Great Harbor Maritime Museum and converting those into digital archives. She mentors other organizations and individuals. She promotes the History Trust to organizations and individuals and meets with them about the possibility of joining with us, and just incredible work. In addition to that, she has really stepped up and been a huge leader in our own internal collections planning. We had sort of a heartfelt conversation among the board and staff about the role that our own individual collections play in our mission and in our ability to share that out with people. What is the reason that we have collections? How do they overlap with our peers in the town of Mount Desert? And Pauline went out and did so much incredible research, trying to find out what best practices would be, coordinating so that we're not competing with some of our peers within the town of Mount Desert, but that we're complementing one another. And she helped lead a task force to sort of address these questions and ultimately end up with a really vastly improved collections management policy. And she does not serve on the collections committee. She led this as an independent task force, and it was just really remarkable work. And I'm deeply grateful for that. So she unfortunately was not able to be with us this evening. She had a family commitment, but she knows she's won the award, and we'll make sure that she sees this portion of the recording so we can all express our heartfelt thanks to Pauline. I see there's a couple in the chats, and so thank you for that, Pauline, and for the Ann Benson Award for Excellence. And now I am thrilled to introduce our board president, Bill Horner, who is going to close out our evening with a few remarks of his own, and then also the vote of the new class of board members. So Bill, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Rainey. And thank you all for attending this second virtual annual meeting of the Society. The 90th, I believe, as far as the organization's history is concerned. Just a couple of quick observations. I am so grateful to be a part of this organization. They've tolerated me now for about 10 years, and in this time, starting through Tim when he was executive director, and now continuing with Rainey, we have been able to build a very strong organization, not only from a financial perspective, but from the active participation of its board members, the ideas that are generated from the board members, the mechanisms we have for debating those ideas and putting those that are good ones into action. And then also having a remarkable staff to work with. So how these two power women and Patrick are able to pull this off, I have no idea, especially considering the contingencies and unknowns of last year, but a big round of snaps to you three. You're fabulous. Speaking of the board, please don't anyone go away. This is your opportunity to participate in the democracy of our organization. Yes, this is the essential business part of the meeting. This year, as far as our board membership is concerned, two members retired. Ann Walmsley put in many, many years of service, for which we're grateful. I have a feeling that Ann is not going away, but she has a deserved retirement from the board. And also Nicole Willett, who was so helpful to us over several years, pertaining to much of the construction of the website and other business related elements. We have this year 3 renewing board members, Ham Clark, whom you've just heard from, and Julia Gray, and also Drew Colbert of College of the Atlantic. And then in addition to them, I am very excited to announce that we have 2 new members coming on. Robin Lawton, whom I see you there somewhere, Robin, in the faces, and Natalie Springle. I want to just give you a little background information on both of them. Robin and her husband, Bob, recently moved here to MDI, well, not so recently, in 2013, to live here year-round. She brings to the society her incredible skills as a retired information technology project manager. And Rainey and I had a wonderful conversation with her the other day, and it appears that she is going to be a perfect fit as we undertake our next strategic plan over this coming year. So, Robin, thanks so much for your willingness to join. I should also mention that she and her husband write murder mysteries, apparently. I think I attended one of these events over at the Seal Cove Auto Museum a few years ago when the exhibit pertaining to the auto wars was in effect. And so they're a talented team, and there's an upcoming mystery novel. So we're awaiting that with interest as well. Natalie Sprengel brings us a very extensive career in science through College of the Atlantic and also the Maine Sea Grant. You may recall that she published an article in Chibako several years ago pertaining to the Maine fisheries and changes that have taken place as a result of harvesting and climate change. I think she's going to find a wonderful fit in our continued project of the landscape of change as that carries that climate change conversation forward, and hopefully into the substantial future. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands and a vote to our 3 renewing board members and our 2 new, that is Robin and Natalie. You won't be able to speak because you're all muted, so I'm going to ask for a show of hands. With all of those in favor, please raise their hand. Let me look at.
If your cameras are not on, you can raise a virtual hand or put it in the chat. There we go.
Oh, see, I'm way behind on technology. All right, it looks unanimous to me. So thank you for that affirmative vote.
To just do the negatives, just the nays, just in case, Bill.
Oh, are there any nays out there? I'm not seeing any. Okay, thank you for the reminder, Rainey. The second item that requires a vote of the membership are the officers of the organization, and you see on the slide here. Gratefully, this is a continuation of our last year's team. So if I could have a vote for this slate, it's been recommended by the executive committee, and all are willing without persuasion. So please raise your hand, all those in favor. And are there any nays? Seeing none, I think we can declare that a unanimous vote. So that pretty much wraps up the business portion of the meeting. I too want to thank Catherine for her long career in science writing, her continued activities with the Schoodic Institute, and her continued relationship with us, not only through, of course, the creation of the current issue of Chibako, but her continued connection with us in our writing efforts. Appreciate it. And then most of all, I want to thank the donors. There are 22 of us on this meeting today. I think our donors number about 20 times that number of 22. So thank you. Somehow, if the electrons penetrate even those who are not here today, just please accept my heartfelt thanks for your very, very generous support over all the years. So I think that pretty well winds up the meeting. I'm getting a nod from Rainey. So if there is a motion to adjourn, I would happily entertain it at this time. Is there one?
So moved, Bill.
See, is there a second? Thank you, Michael. You're very dependable in that regard. All those in favor, please raise a hand. Are there any opposed to adjourning this meeting? I doubt it. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. It's been a wonderful meeting. We hope, though, that by this time next year, we can see one another in person. So until then, stay well. Think about history. You're all historians. You're going to be hearing a lot about citizen history in the next year. And so dig out those old family diaries. Even think about writing a little bit. So we'll leave it at that. Goodbye.
Thank you all. Have a good night.